Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Reaction Show. My name is Andrew Velez. I'm here with my co-host, as always, Mr. Joel Dehls. We are here after Week 1, opening day, NFL football, Chiefs versus Ravens. Not the outcome probably you or I wanted, but Joel, we have to admit, we watched an all-time game, one of the best opening days of football we've ever had. And that Cowboys-Bucks game was pretty good, but this one might just be the best I've ever seen. Before we break down into this game, Mr. Dehls, how are you doing tonight?
Doing fantastic. We got a heater, man. I'm ready to get into it. You said it. We were all waiting for this week 1 game. We even had to wait 20 extra minutes because of the lightning and Arrowhead, but we got blessed, man. I mean, maybe not from start to finish, but definitely that fourth quarter really picked up when the Ravens go on that drive. We're going to talk all about it, but damn, that was a great game we just watched.
It was everything you could ask for, a little bit of offense, a little bit of defense, and right down to the wire. Ravens down double digits. Lamar Jackson goes, minute 50 left on the clock, is able to drive down the field, get his team within one play, and this poor bastard goes, throws the ball, and Isaiah Likely is centimeters away from tying this, or potentially putting them in a position to what seemed like they were going for 2 points, trying to go and win the game. I have to go and give credit to Lamar Jackson, who went out there and he struggled in the first half. And not so much that he struggled, more so on top of it, the offensive line was getting absolutely torn apart. He had to rush plays. He had to go and hit the check down almost every single time. His average depth of target was comically low, especially in that first half, but stayed resilient, stayed tough, was able to maneuver in the pocket, extend plays, do Lamar Jackson type things that only Lamar Jackson can do. Goes out there, rushes for 122 yards on 16 carries. And where he didn't have the best performance as a passer, still goes for 273, throws a touchdown to Isaiah Likely, a touchdown that I give a lot of credit to Isaiah Likely. But at the same time, down the stretch, big throw to Rashad Bateman, unbelievable body control by him, ability to stay in bounds, hold on to the ball, even give them a glimmer of hope of trying to score. And the play that's probably going to be haunting Lamar Jackson all night, completely missing Zay Flowers in the end zone. As I'm watching it, I don't want to immediately react and say, wow, this is all-time Chuck. You watch the replay from the quarterback's view, and it's as bad as it looked. It's fair. It's fast. The play is happening. He's trying to evade pressure. And as Zay Flowers is running towards the right side of the field, Lamar Jackson just throws to the left. Lamar, I know he wants that one back. I know that he makes that throw more often than not. But in the clutch, it's pretty terrible that happened.
Yeah, and I see people in the comments asking about Isaiah Likely, Mark Andrews. We're going to get to all that for sure. There's a lot to break down there. But just first initial reactions, man, this was tough. And Drew, I saw the tweet. Disaster class for Lamar Jackson in the first half.
Am I wrong?
Man, let the game play out. But yeah, that throw is definitely going to come back to haunt him. I mean, a Lamar defender, he was moving to his right, had a throw back left, but he was so damn open. I don't care what you got to do. You got to get that ball there. Even the Isaiah Likely play, he got injured. He came back like a play or two later, but he was also pretty open, right? Like it was a more difficult throw. His feet weren't set, but that was another opportunity where Lamar, corner of the end zone, that's probably a throw a 2-time MVP should make. But no, of course, that one to Zay Flowers really stuck out. And then, of course, the last one, toe on the line, KD part 2, shout out to the $2 donation that we just got. Man, that hurt because the ball was perfect. It was right where Likely could get it. Likely made an insane catch using all 6'5" of that frame, going up there to grab it down, and his toe is just on the line. And we mentioned it. They were going to go for 2 and try to win that game, and I do not blame them. I would have done the same exact thing. I would have gone for 2. I don't want to have to deal with Mahomes in overtime game. I don't want to have to deal with a coin toss to see if he gets the ball first there. But, man, we just witnessed this. So, from a fantasy perspective, what should we break down first? I think the tight end room, I think the Andrews versus Likely is what everyone wants to hear about. As someone, I have Andrews in 2 or 3 leagues. In our main league, I have Mark Andrews as well. That's probably the biggest story coming away from this. And I'll go ahead and just give my thoughts first. If you have Mark Andrews, you should be concerned. I think no doubt about it because Isaiah Likely is talented as shit. we've been talking about Isaiah Likely for multiple seasons now. When we did our tight ends rankings, got to give you credit, Drew. You said you were a bit scared of Mark Andrews this year because of Isaiah Likely's potential in this offense. I'm like, you know what? He's been this good and they haven't used him, so let's wait and see. And shout out to Todd Monk in this offense. They went out and used Isaiah Likely. Don't have the numbers just yet. I'll see if I could find how much he was actually out on the field, but it felt like he was out there for 80% of snaps. There was a lot of Andrews and Likely. I wouldn't be surprised if Likely was on the field more. But the reason why I say you should be scared of Likely if you have Mark Andrews, number one is because he is so damn talented. Like, this is a guy that has talent to be a bona fide top 10 tight end in the league at a minimum. Top 7 is very within the realm of possibility. But Mark Andrews is still kind of getting back into the swing of things. He missed a couple weeks of practice after he had that car accident. They mentioned it as undisclosed. I don't know if there was something else going on. So he's a little bit slow entering this season. And now Isaiah Likely has a real chance to maybe not overtake the tight end 1 role, but now there's a real option there at tight end outside of him, right? Over these last few years, when they've had Mark Andrews, like, they've had guys here and there, right? They've had Hollywood Brown for a year. They've had Odell last season. And outside of that, there really wasn't another wide receiver that sticks out. Now you have Zay Flowers, who maybe isn't going to win down the field a ton like we saw today, but he's going to get used a ton in kind of that short intermediate route. He's going to soak up a ton of targets. So all of a sudden, the target competition really ramps up. And this is still an offense that's going to want to run through Lamar Jackson, run through Derrick Henry. So if you're telling me you're on a team where you want to run the ball first, and any given week you could be the number 1 or number 3 option on their team, I love Mark Andrews. Is the talent gap between him and Isaiah Likely that large where Andrews needs 12 targets and Likely only gets 4 or 5 a game? I don't think so. I think the talent gap is a lot smaller than that. So I'm not overreacting. I'm not dropping Mark Andrews. I'm not sitting him next week, but I'm definitely looking at my team saying I might need a tight end in a couple weeks. And if I need a tight end, Isaiah Likely is a dude I'm willing to spend probably like 50 to 60% of my fab on. I think he's that talented. And I think when you see a young player have such a great week 1, we've seen him be great in the past. Don't be scared about blowing your fab. Like, this is a guy that's legitimately good at football. So we'll probably talk more about fab and waiver wires once Monday comes around. But right now, he is the number 1 priority by far.
And we've known Lamar Jackson to favor tight ends. We saw Lamar Jackson with Mark Andrews, going put up one of the best tight end receiving seasons that we've seen. Isaiah Likely, like you mentioned, and I'll reiterate the same point, has the capabilities and the talent to be an upper echelon, top 5, top 7 tight end in the National Football League. It was on full display today against a very solid Chiefs defense, whose secondary may not be good as last season's, obviously with the subtraction of a L'Jarius Sneed. But Isaiah Likely was making plays on his own. You already mentioned the touchdown that wasn't at the very end of the game, but the touchdown that was not the best pass by Lamar Jackson by any means. Great escapability from him, great playmaking by Lamar Jackson, but a great play by Isaiah Likely to keep his concentration and go and make some nice moves after the catch as well. I think Isaiah Likely has shown this last season where he did have 5 touchdowns, which was tied for 7th in the National Football League, and did that with Mark Andrews getting banged up a little bit more than the halfway point of last year's NFL season. If he would have had an opportunity to play a good amount of more snaps while Mark Andrews was on the field, he may have been able to finish amongst one of the top guys at the end of the day. But you had Mark Andrews, who obviously has to have respect, and I'm with you. We're not overreacting. We're not going to completely take Mark Andrews out of our lineups because Isaiah Likely had such a great game. I'm very interested to see the snap percentages between the two of them, because we've been saying you need to play 12 personnel with Isaiah Likely and Mark Andrews. They are your 2 best offensive weapons at the wide receiver and tight end position, outside of course, Zay Flowers. You see the explosiveness, you see the consistency out of Isaiah Likely, and in spurts you see that moments out of Zay Flowers as well. I think he was trying to do a little bit too much with the ball in his hands today. I think that as the season will progress, he'll get a lot better with that. And of course, not going up against the Chiefs pass rush, which was wreaking havoc all over the Baltimore Ravens offensive line. And Mark Andrews is going to be okay. This was not an ideal matchup, but at the same time, you have to understand Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews have an obvious connection. 6 touchdowns last season, which tied him for second in National Football League, and he missed a good portion of the year. I'm still going to trust that he will be a serviceable tight end. He'll be one of the best tight ends, but I can't say this enough. Go and get Isaiah Likely. Isaiah Likely is a must-add this incoming week of waiver wire ads. You saw it last year. If you missed out on the wave of Puka Nacua, you were kicking yourself in the ass because Puka Nacua ends up being a league winner. At the tight end position, of a volume of 9 receptions, 12 targets, over 100 yards, and almost 2 touchdowns, but a touchdown nonetheless, that is value at the tight end position that you cannot pass up, especially with a quarterback like Lamar Jackson, who has shown to favor the tight end position.
So have the numbers. Shout out to Michael Florio. Isaiah Likely 70% of snaps, team high 12 targets, had 9 catches, 111 yards, and touchdown. He ran 24 routes. Andrews ran 28. So Andrews ran a few more, but of course Likely was far more efficient. 52% of snaps came from the slot. We saw both of them, Andrews and Likely, kind of flip-flop between being in line and being in the slot. And the tight end that was in line for most of this game was chipping or was blocking. So they got a slow start coming off the line. Of course, nearly had that second touchdown. I think the other position that's worth a note for both of these teams are the running backs, right? I think Pacheco and Derrick Henry. For the Chiefs side, Pacheco, the last week or so, whenever they signed Samaje Perine, there was some real concern in the fantasy community. I think it's fair because he's such a elite pass catching back. But Pacheco was the dude week 1, 80% of snaps, 15 carries for 45 yards. He had 22 routes, had 3 targets, 2 catches and 33 yards. Samaje Perine only ran 7 routes. So this is also week 1. Perine just signed a week or two ago, so I wouldn't be shocked if he saw increase in usage. But 80% of snaps, I could go back and check last year, but I don't know if Pacheco hit that. If he did, it was probably only once or twice, maybe in the playoffs. But 80% of snaps is a very good sign if you're a Pacheco manager. We know he's going to be used around the goal line as well. And then the other one I want to mention, of course, is Derrick Henry, because we didn't really talk about the other possibility with Derrick Henry, right? I still think Derrick Henry's great. He could be a top 10 running back, all of that stuff. But I did mention it when we did maybe our divisional breakdown or a couple of weeks ago, that they mentioned on the broadcast too, which reminded me. Lamar Jackson is mostly a shotgun quarterback, right? He likes to play at a shotgun. That's where he's most comfortable. Derrick Henry is best running out of the I formation when Lamar Jackson is under center. So there's a little bit of just unnaturalness. That's not a word, but it's just not a natural fit, although they're individually incredible talents. And Derrick Henry was not really used on third down this game. It was a lot of Justice Hill. Derrick Henry was out there for 49% of snaps. Justice Hill was out there for 51% of snaps. You saw on that last drive of the game, Justice Hill was out there for basically every single snap, if not all of them. Derrick Henry's not going to be utilized a ton, in my opinion, on third down. He's probably not going to be utilized a ton in the 2-minute area in the end of each half. But where Derrick Henry is going to be utilized, first and second down, of course it's going to be in that goal line. So I do think, although the hype Derrick Henry had was justified, the true bell cow work where he gets 80% of snaps and is out there for 3 downs, I think what Baltimore showed us this first game is it's probably not going to happen.
And also, in close games like this, I agree wholeheartedly with you. It will not happen. When the Baltimore Ravens inevitably are blowing teams out, you'll see those big game explosions out of Derrick Henry. But when they're going up against tough competition, expect situations like today. And you saw that even with his tenure with Tennessee. Early in games, you're able to utilize Derrick Henry because games are close. But then when it's obvious passing downs and obvious passing situations late in games when you're trailing and you need a back that is capable of being both a rushing and a receiving threat, you're not going to see Derrick Henry on the field more often than not. Justice Hill is not a bad running back by any means, especially as a receiving back. You're going to see a lot of Justice Hill in those situations, but 13 carries. I get that, they were down two double-digit scores late in the game, and you had to go and they had to move the ball, push the ball with the pass. But early situations, Derrick Henry, understanding that Lamar Jackson is going to be in shotgun a lot, is going to take an adjustment period from the two of them. I expect Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson to get on the same page, but when you have the explosiveness of a Lamar Jackson with just the presence of Derrick Henry alone, obviously it's going to help out both of them. But you saw from Lamar Jackson today where the defense is really locked in on Derrick Henry, and on those read options, we saw Lamar Jackson go out there and have big play after big play. But on the opposite side, Isaiah Pacheco, but neither of these guys were efficient. 13 for 46 out of Derrick Henry and 15 for 45 out of Pacheco. Both were able to salvage fantasy performances by getting into the end zone. Pacheco had a bad drop that could have been a big play for him early on in the game. But this was a tough matchup for both of these guys. I expected a little bit better game out of Derrick Henry, especially because this Chiefs rush defense is not the greatest comparatively to the Baltimore Ravens. But not a great matchup for the two of them. Still able to pull out to salvage a solid fantasy performance, but you expect more from both of these guys. And 16 fantasy points, double-digit fantasy points for Derrick Henry. In a tough matchup, you will take that, but you are definitely monitoring the situation on Baltimore side a little bit more. We saw Pacheco get a ton of usage. I feel like that was a little bit of a concern coming into this game. I'm not worried about his usage with Kansas City. And truthfully, I'm not too worried about Derrick Henry's usage with the Ravens for the sole fact they were trailing a lot in this game, and they had obvious passing situations. And obviously, they had to do what they had to do, and they made big plays. That's something to take away positive from Baltimore's offense. However, singling in on Derrick, there will be better situations for Derrick to have a lot more blow-up games. This was unfortunately just not one of them.
And we could go ahead and talk about your guy. Rashee Rice out there right off the bat. First play of the Chiefs offense, little slant route right to Rashee Rice. Rashee's a stud. Why the hell are the Ravens putting linebackers on him? Like, at some point, we have to come in here, whether it's on the sideline, whether it's halftime, and be like, yo, maybe you put a DB on him. They probably still can't cover him, but you put a linebacker on him, and you have one of the smartest quarterbacks in the NFL, and Patrick Mahomes, it's going to be food.
It feels wrong how much I love Rashee Rice, because I mean it from the bottom of my heart, Joel. I love Rashee Rice.
He's a dog.
He is a fantasy football dream, and he's with the best quarterback.
Did you see Dehls' tweet?
Oh, trust me. I saw it, and it honestly made me so fucking happy. And as we talk about it, Mr. Dehls, I get goosebumps. Imagine that. The second coming of who? Amon-Ra St. Brown. And they're going to use that as a knock on him in the future. Just remember that I said that, because they run in the slot. They go and they work on mismatches. And like today we saw from Rashee Rice going up against linebackers, if you're going to disrespect Rashee Rice and put a linebacker on him, he's going to do what he did against you today and go for 103 on 7 catches for 9 targets. Rashee Rice is simply too good for that. He's an amazing separator, and he has high-level hands, especially with the darts that Patrick Mahomes was throwing to Rashee Rice. Legitimate fastballs that every single time Rashee Rice was coming down with, and he is excellent after the catch. Does not have breakaway speed, but he is amazing after the catch, and we saw that on full display today. A lot of credit needs to be given to this Chiefs wide receiving core. Unfortunately, Juju Smith-Schuster wasn't able to bring that touchdown down, but Xavier Worthy in his first game in the NFL, 2 touchdowns, a carry for a touchdown, and a nice big play that ended up being a busted coverage that he goes and gets into the end zone. This is going to be, as much as it may pain me, but talking blatantly honest, this is going to be a fun pass offense by the Kansas City Chiefs. You have an amazing, near elite separator in Rashee Rice, and you have Xavier Worthy, who has the ability to take the top off at any moment and has has the ability to have plays drawn up for him where he's getting the ball in the backfield like you saw today. And then you have Hollywood Brown coming in inevitably at some point in time, and we saw Travis Kelce get outperformed by Noah Gray today. It's going to get scary, Joel, and it's going to get scary super fast. I fear what's going to happen, but the truth is the truth. They're going to continue to move Rashee Rice to get these different mismatches. You simply cannot guard Xavier Worthy, especially because of how fast he is. And then, we're guarding these guys. We forget about the best tight end in the National Football League.
Yeah, I mean, we knew how good the Chiefs offense was going to be. Even watching it, just felt like, damn, like you mentioned, do this without Hollywood. You're doing this without Travis Kelce really getting involved. Yeah, no, this game was great. I don't really have any other takeaways from this, unless you do. I'm good again to the starts and sets.
One thing I want to talk about is Zay Flowers. I mentioned a little bit earlier when we talked about. I feel as if he was pressing a little bit, trying to look for the big play a little too much, and then over the top where there was moments where he was creating separation, and Lamar Jackson just simply didn't have the right touch today. I think we'll see him clean that up. I think both him and Lamar will get on the same page as the season goes on. But he needs to stop looking for that home run every single time. He's a very great player. He's a very elusive player, but he has to pick and choose. I saw him trying to get a little bit too shifty, and that ended up costing him some yards and potential extra yards that could have put the Ravens in a little bit better field position. But 10 targets, what more can you ask for, especially from a guy that you probably used a mid-fifth, late fifth, early sixth, maybe potential seventh round pick on. You love that opportunity there. I think that the only concern for the Ravens offense, if you are a manager, is Mark Andrews. But if that's your biggest concern, I think that you have better days to come, and there's a lot bigger problems at hand. But Mr. Dehls, let's do it. The best time of the week, starts and sits of the week. We can start with the happy side. Let's go with our starts of the week, and we'll get into our sits. You can start us off at the quarterback position.
At the quarterback, there's going to be a common theme with all of my starts. We'll see if anyone can catch on. My start of the week is going to be Jared Goff. Believe it or not, my guy, someone I've been hyping up all off season. They're going up against the Rams, Sunday Night Football, highest over-under of the week at 52. The next highest isn't until Miami-Jacksonville at 49, 3-point difference. You know how I feel about Jared Goff, man. This is more than anything, right? Because we know how great he is at home. We know how great he is in a dome. We know how great he is when Amon-Ra and Laporta and all them boys are out there, and everything is going to be stacked up against him, or with him, I should say. And we're going to talk about some other players from this game, too. I'm expecting a high-scoring game. I'm expecting the offenses to dominate this game, although I do think the Lions defense got better this offseason. But more than anything, I think what's more interesting is just the quarterbacks that I would start Jared Goff over. So some names I would start Jared Goff over Dak Prescott, who goes up against the Cleveland Browns defense this week. I would start Jared Goff over Brock Purdy, who goes against the New York Jets defense this week. And even a guy like Joe Burrow, I would strongly consider. I don't know how many leagues out there where you really have Goff and Burrow, right? They're kind of going similar-ish. Burrow is a few rounds earlier for sure, but, late roundish quarterback in those one quarterback leagues. But Joe Burrow going up against the New England defense that is their strong suit. Jamar Chase probably not going to play 100% of snaps, right? I wouldn't be surprised if he played kind of 60, 70, ease him in. And you have Christian Gonzalez potentially covering T. Higgins on those other plays. I think that could be more of a low-scoring kind of sluggish games than we're anticipating. But if you have Jared Goff, there's outside of those top 5, 6, we're talking about, of course, Mahomes and Lamar tonight, Kyler Murray, those type of dudes that you drafted high, Jalen Hurts. I'm starting Jared Goff basically over all of them. I think he has a top 7, top 8 type of potential this week.
Early guess, because I haven't seen your starts of the week. I did send you mine. Early guess. I'll figure it out eventually. These are all guys that are playing their old teams. That's just a guess. We'll see if it's true. All right, darn it. All right, my quarterback start of the week is going to be Mr. Baker Mayfield himself going up against the Washington Commanders. Now, this is an amazing matchup for me because I look at what the Commanders were giving up last season. Last season, they gave up the most yards and the most touchdowns to fantasy quarterbacks. They gave up the second most fantasy points to quarterbacks. I believe the most was the Philadelphia Eagles, if I'm not mistaken.
Probably.
But that being said, this is an amazing matchup. Baker Mayfield, especially with the weapons of Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, you're anticipating that they're going to air it out. To me, I'm not overthinking it too much. I understand that Baker Mayfield, this is more so for two quarterbacks. If you're in a one quarterback and you waited rounds to really draft a quarterback, Baker Mayfield would be a perfect plug and play for me going up against the Commanders. Again, there's not many defenses, especially in the secondary, that are as bad as this one. And they did not do much to add on to protect and benefit their defense, especially adding Dan Quinn, who obviously is a defensive-minded head coach. But the addition that they did make were bringing in Bobby Wagner, who's not great in coverage at this point in his career, and Frankie Louvu. Not great players in the secondary. I'm fully anticipating Baker Mayfield to go out there and have himself a baller performance.
Absolutely. Moving on to running backs now. Kenneth Walker. Have you found the theme yet?
Well, you said it. You blew it. You're my guys.
Another my guy. Kenneth Walker, Seattle Seahawks go to face the Denver Broncos this week, that vaunted Broncos defense. They allowed the third most fantasy points to running backs last season. And, we had made comments, right? The Broncos defense got better the second half of last year, but against the run, it didn't get much better. They were 27th in success rate entirety in the 2023 season, but just specifically in the second half, week 9 on, that didn't get much better. Went from 27th in success rate to 25th in success rate. So this wasn't a defense that really turned it around in terms of stopping the run. They were able to get a lot of turnovers, fumbles, interceptions, things like that, but they weren't able to consistently stop the run. Seattle is one of the offenses I am most looking forward to seeing with Ryan Grubb coming over from Washington, how he utilizes all these receivers. There's a ton of hype around JSN. Of course, DK Metcalf. Gino just had a comment about him earlier today saying he could be the best wide receiver in football, talking about how he has to clean up his diet a little bit. I get that. Skittles and candy be going crazy sometimes. But Kenneth Walker this week, I love. I think he's an RB1. If I did rankings weekly, he would be a top 12 running back. It's a great matchup going up against the Denver Broncos. I've talked about Zach Charbonnet, not in the highest of lights. I don't think he is on the same tier of Kenneth Walker as a runner all off season long. The coaching staff has just hyped up Kenneth Walker. Did not play at all in the preseason. He's the clear RB1 in a great matchup in a game they were favored in, a game I think Seattle is going to win. So fire up Kenneth Walker this week.
Kenneth Walker, I'm praying, does not have a good game, but for your analysis, I'm hoping that he has a great game. But obviously, going up against my Denver Broncos, I want to see us start the season off with a W. But Kenny Walker is going to be an awesome play. My running back start of the week, my guy, Mr. James Cook, going up against the Arizona Cardinals. If you wanted a blow-up game from a player, you wanted him to play against the Arizona Cardinals, specifically your running backs. Last season, nobody gave up more rushing yards and nobody gave up more touchdowns, or nobody gave up more fantasy points to the running back position than the Arizona Cardinals. I've spoken ad nauseum about James Cook and how awesome he is as a running back, how efficient he is as a running back. His main issue would be the fact that he does drop passes, but even regardless of that, he's still one of the league leaders in receiving yards at the running back position against the Arizona Cardinals, who are going to be, once again, one of the worst, if not the worst, defenses in the National Football League. I'm guaranteeing James Cook will be a top 5 finish this week. There is no better matchup for a running back than going up against the Arizona Cardinals. And James Cook, with this Buffalo Bills team, they are going to be a run-heavy offense, especially with their lack of weapons at the outside. I know they did use heavy draft capital on Keon Coleman. They did use a first-round pick in not this past draft, but the draft before, first-round pick on a Dalton Kincaid. Brought in Curtis Samuel this offseason. Have, of course, Khalil Shakir. To me, that's irrelevant, especially in this matchup. The Bills are going to be up. They're going to be dominating on the offensive side, and it's going to begin and end with James Cook.
I love that. We might talk about another Buffalo Bill later. Who knows? But my start of the week at the wide receiver position, it's going to be the Bucs wide receivers. Mike Evans, of course, you're starting. So this is more of a Chris Godwin call, who is probably in consideration for your flex this week, depending on, how you draft the first 7 rounds or so in your fantasy drafts. But you mentioned it with Baker Mayfield. You're going up against the Commanders, who had probably the worst defense in fantasy football last season. They were the worst going up against other opposing fantasy wide receivers. Nobody gave up more fantasy points. And you mentioned it. Dan Quinn, defensive-minded head coach, had some moments with the Cowboys where the defense looked amazing and it was running around out there and it was going crazy and causing turnovers. But there was also moments like that Packers game where things really fell apart. And more than anything, this isn't even a knock on Dan Quinn. It's just the personnel there. They did not bring in anyone this season that makes you think this secondary is going to improve, that makes you think this pass rush is going to improve. This defense is still going to be terrible. And what I'm most looking forward to is to see Chris Godwin in the slot again, right? When Chris Godwin was at his most elite, he was playing in the slot about 70% of the time. In 2023, he was in the slot in just 37% of plays. That was his lowest total since the 2018 season, right? This was fucking pre-ACL tear Chris Godwin. He was not the same type of player. So I'm excited to see him in the slot. The coaching staff had talked about it this entire offseason, that it's going to be his primary role again. I don't know why it was really taken out of that role, because he was one of the best slot wide receivers in the game, going back a couple of years, of course, with Tom Brady. But Chris Godwin, especially in the flex spot, especially in like a PPR league where he could get 7, 8, 9 receptions very easily, I think he's going to have a big game this week.
My wide receiver start of the week is going to be one of your guys this upcoming season, and that's going to be Mr. Cooper Kupp going up against the Detroit Lions. Now, I understand the Detroit Lions did a lot this offseason to address their poor secondary. You drafted Terrion Arnold, and you go and you bring in Carlton Davis as well in trade. But last season, this was one of the worst secondaries in football. They gave up a generous amount of points to wide receivers. Last year allowed the third most fantasy points to wide receivers. But I understand that these guys, it's going to take more than 1 week, especially when you're going up against a juggernaut like the Rams offense. And this has been one of the most exciting camps that we've heard from Cooper Kupp in a little bit of time, because of course, he has had the injury history. Last year came in with the hamstring, came back, was okay. Then he really was not the Cooper Kupp that we were accustomed to. And we saw Puka Nacua really take a stranglehold of that wide receiver one. And then all this offseason was hyping up Puka Nacua. We're using first-round picks on Puka Nacua. We're using extremely high draft capital on Puka. But here comes Cooper Kupp being that fifth, sixth-round steal. And all we're hearing in camp is how amazing and how back he looks to being the Rams wide receiver one. And going up against the Detroit secondary, especially with the chip on their shoulder after losing in round one last year in the wild card to the Detroit Lions, I'm anticipating Cooper Kupp to go out there and show everyone week one that he still is one of the best receivers in the game.
Yeah, I have DJ Moore is my guy. I'll stand on that, no issue. But if I want to say put my money where my mouth is, I have Cooper Kupp, and probably 80% of leagues, I have drafted Cooper Kupp everywhere just because the value this year has been so insane. Like, he in most of my leagues is my wide receiver 3. Sometimes he's my wide receiver 2. And we did get the report early in training camp, like the offense runs through Cooper Kupp. He looks like vintage Cooper Kupp. It's a little scary to have that much Cooper Kupp because we know that the injury history has been there, but when he's been healthy, we know how great he can be. Moving on, though, tight end start of the week. Dalton Kincaid, another my guy here to round out the starts of the week. I've talked about Dalton Kincaid, right? He was my guy at the position. I think he's due for a big season. I think this is a 1,000-yard type of season, hovering around 80 catches for him. And when I look at the Arizona Cardinals, who they're going up against and who could potentially be guarding him, you have Kaiser White, who ranked as the 47th best linebacker in terms of coverage grade per PFF. If you want a slot corner on him, Garrett Williams is the projected slot corner for the Arizona Cardinals. He was the 93rd ranked corner in the NFL last season. They do have Mack Wilson Sr., who I believe was coming over from New England. He's kind of had an up and down career. In 2022, he was at a 47.1 grade for coverage. This past year, he was up to like in the 80s. So he could be hit or miss. But Dalton Kincaid in this offense going up against the Cardinals, I'm expecting week one, we're going to see. He's the number one option on this team. He's going to lead the team in targets. Of course, if you have Dalton Kincaid, you're going to start him. But he has the potential this week to be the tight end one overall.
I'm looking forward to seeing Kincaid play, especially in a very lucrative matchup for him. I say that because this could set the tone for what is a lot of people have a lot of faith in Kincaid being the number one option for this Bills team. Like I do also believe, but to me, this isn't the litmus test of the ceiling for Dalton Kincaid. This is a good matchup. I'm definitely looking forward to it, but he's still one of those guys that I have capital in him. I have stock in him, I should say. I have him in a couple of leagues. I believe in the upside, but it's not one of those picks that I feel the most confident right now. But he should be in for an awesome week, especially against one of the worst defenses in the Cardinals. My tight end start of the week is going to be another guy that I feel like I've heard you talk about a little bit on the podcast, and that's going to be Mr. Taysom Hill going up against the Carolina Panthers. Carolina Panthers were not a great rush defense last season, but on top of it, you look at Taysom Hill, and you've been hearing the noise about how they want to utilize him, especially when you get into that red zone area, because Derek Carr is so horrendous in that part of the football field that Taysom Hill goes in there and he gives you that boost that you need, especially get into the end zone. Last season when he played against the Panthers, only matched up in one match, only was able to go up against them in one matchup. But in that matchup, 9 carries, 75 yards. I mean, as efficient as it gets. In his opportunity last season as well, was able to rush for 4 touchdowns, but also get into the end zone with 2 receptions as is. I feel like this is one of those games, especially in a daily fantasy league. If you want to go and spend top dollar on other positions, you can go in and get Taysom Hill for a very nice price. And I'm feeling this is one of those games where we see Taysom Hill get into the end zone once, maybe even twice. That's kind of how I'm feeling with Taysom Hill. The Panthers defense, to me, I understand they do have Derek Brown, one of the better interior tackles in the game on the defensive line, of course. But I still don't know what to believe in this Carolina Panthers team as a whole. But in this matchup, especially with Taysom Hill, I can see a touchdown or two in his future.
Yeah, and Taysom Hill is probably the top of the list in terms of if you have an IR spot, right? Say, you had someone like Marshawn Lloyd, for example, say he gets ruled out tomorrow, put him on the IR. Taysom Hill is one of those dudes who I want to pick up right away because if he goes out there and he has 8 or 9 rushing attempts, he has 6 or 7 targets, all of a sudden he had just 15 opportunities and he could get listed as a tight end and he's going to be utilized around the goal line. And any given week, he could throw the ball 2 or 3 times. So if you're in those leagues with an IR spot, look out for any of those players on your bench that might get ruled out this upcoming week. Pick up Taysom Hill. I love that start. Moving on to sits of the week, and we said it in the comments, but if you guys have start sits, feel free to drop them in the comments. We'll answer it at the end of the show. Sits of the week, though, at the quarterback position. I hate to have to do this, but I am sitting Caleb Williams week 1 of this season going up against the Tennessee Titans. Last year, Titans were about middle of the pack in terms of Garden Fantasy quarterbacks. They were the 15th best defense, but of course we now know they added L'Jarius Sneed, who is one of the best defensive backs in the NFL last season. This was a Titans secondary that definitely needed some extra juice to them. And I think the number one reason I'm saying to sit Caleb Williams is because everyone is eager to start him. Everyone, the number 1 overall pick. USC is retiring his jersey number, by the way, which was kind of hilarious. Like, he didn't really do much there, but shout out to the Heisman he got.
Didn't he win the Heisman over there at USC?
Say it again?
Didn't he win the Heisman with USC?
He did. No, definitely. Okay. Yeah, no playoffs, none of that. But shout out to Caleb. Definitely deserve it. Everyone's excited to start him because he has all the hype around him. We saw the highlight plays in the preseason, but it's not like in the preseason they were consistently moving the ball. It's not like in the preseason they look like what the Kansas City Chiefs just looked like on our TV, or how even the Baltimore Ravens for that last drive where everything was coming easy. He had the highlight plays, right? Getting out of the pocket, hitting Roma Dunze down the field for sure. But this was a guy that just completed 50% of his passes in the preseason. They were going 3 and out. They're going to have their hurdles. They're going to have their bumps. And he's the sexy name, right? He is the shining light when it comes to the quarterback position, especially in these one quarterback leagues. But again, you have Jared Goff, and he's going up against the Rams. Start him. You have Tua out there going up against the Jaguars at home, 1:00. Start him. They're not the sexy names. Caleb is the sexy name. Just give it a week. Wait to see what Caleb looks like. I think the Bears are a playoff team. I think it's a team that can win 10 games, but I'm not set in stone thinking this is going to be a top 10 offense right out of the gate.
Even me, who I feel like I have a good grasp of fantasy football, sometimes you need to hear from another person. And I'm excited for what Caleb Williams is going to bring to the National Football League. And I would love to put him in my lineup week 1, but maybe I'll take your advice and I'll wait one more just to see what he's capable of. But I like how he's going to be able to match up against Tennessee. I know L'Jarius Sneed, I know Chidobe Awuzie are great additions to that Tennessee secondary. But of course, you know the hype of Caleb Williams, you know the personnel, the talent on the offensive side. That's going to be a fun one to watch. But I agree. Give it 1 week, see what he's got, and then you adjust accordingly. My quarterback sit of the week is one of our favorite guys, truthfully. We have no animosity towards this dude. He's been a fantasy darling. This was one of Joel's great calls of last season. And I'm talking about Mr. Brock Purdy going up against the New York Jets. Last season, going up against the New York Jets, if you had a fantasy quarterback, was one of the worst experiences you could have had. They allowed the second fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks last year, only second to the Baltimore Ravens. And again, Trent Williams just got back. Brandon Ayuk just got back. I can see a situation where this is a muddy game and Christian McCaffrey is going to have to be getting utilized a little bit more than maybe you anticipate. And it is one of those grinded out type victories. I can see a 20-17 game in this outcome of the Niners versus the Jets. I can't see a world where Trent finally comes back and the Jets defensive line that is going to wreak havoc isn't going to be all in the backfield and giving Brock Purdy fits. It's one of those situations where I don't love a lot of the plays on the Niners side of the ball this week. We're going to be talking about another guy a little bit later when I do my sits at the other positions. It's not a great matchup for the Niners, and I understand the Niners are still one of the best offenses. Sometimes you have to respect a great defense, and we're going to see the Jets take it to that next level this year because their offense is going to at least stay on the field a little bit longer and give the defense a little bit of a break. We're going to see them dominate at another level because of that. But in this matchup, where the Jets just don't give up touchdowns either. They allowed the fourth fewest touchdowns to the quarterback position. I want to stay away from Brock Purdy this week because I respect the Giants defense so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Jets defense. But we respect the Giants defense here too. Absolutely.
Did I say Giants? Apologize.
Yeah.
Shout out to the Giants, but Jets.
Moving on to the running back sit of the week. For me, it's going to be Jerome Ford this week. I think in plus matchups, Ford is a really solid RB2 start. When Nick Chubb went down last season, he was someone that I know I spent like damn near all my fab on because I had J.K. Dobbins, and he was steady, right? Week in and week out. He always hovered around that like RB 16 to 22 range. The Cowboys are a tough matchup. Last season, they were the 8th best defense against fantasy running backs. And although Jerome Ford is steady, he's not someone that's talented enough to overcome a bad matchup. From last season, from week 6 on, he only had 4 games of 15 or more carries. And when I was looking at those numbers, I was a bit surprised because it felt like they really leaned on him. And while he did do decent through the air last year, 44 receptions, I think is for especially in a Browns backfield. We don't see Nick Chubb really get those type of looks. Deshaun Watson and him, it was kind of hot and cold in the receiving game. They overlapped in 4 different games. He was either utilized heavily, 2 games, he had 6 or more targets, and the other 2 games, he had 3 other games with 4 or less targets. So there were some matchups where Deshaun Watson and Stefanski were really trying to get him involved, whether it was in the screen game or just out of the backfield. But there was other times where we know Deshaun Watson, like there's some times where he's just going to go in the backfield and do 3,000 spins and end up getting sacked or throw an interception. So Jerome Ford, like I said, he was one of the best values in drafts because he was going sometimes in double-digit rounds. If you were someone who went 0 RB or hero RB and you drafted Breece Hall in the first and you waited till the 9th or 10th round and got Jerome Ford, I love that type of draft strategy. But if you have different options out there, I would look that way because going up against Dallas, who's already a tough defense, and I'm not high on Dallas this week against Cleveland, so I don't think Cleveland necessarily is going to have to be catching up to them. I think this is going to be a bit of a low-scoring, kind of slug-it-out type of matchup, and we know Jerome Ford has the opportunity, especially in the goal line situation. I want to see week 1. What does Deshaun look like? Where does his targets go? We just add Jerry Jeudy to the mix too. And Njoku's coming out of breakout year second half of the season. So it's not an absolute don't put him in your lineup because he was such a great value. He might be better than some other options out there. But he's not someone I'm excited to start this week.
I'll tell you what, it's interesting because I was looking at that, and the Cowboys definitely were pretty solid against the run fantasy-wise. But then you saw late in the season, especially that game versus the Packers, that stands out to me, where Aaron Jones was able to do whatever he wanted. That's kind of one of the reasons why I understood Jerome Ford this week going up against the Cowboys. But obviously, you respect the fantasy numbers and what they were able to do for a majority of last year. They should, especially against a pretty average running back in Jerome Ford, they should be able to limit him. I have a guy who, if you had the RB hero strategy or the 0 RB strategy, this is a guy that's most likely on your team, and that's going to be Jaylen Warren. This is going to be my sit versus the Atlanta Falcons. Now, last year in terms of giving up points to the fantasy running backs, they're around middle of the pack also. However, you have to respect David Onyemata. You have to respect Grady Jarrett and their ability to stop the run. But what really is hindering me from really going all in, understanding Jaylen Warren was pretty solid last season when it came to fantasy football. He was good for a double-digit performance. He was great for a breakout run every now and then as well. He was one of the guys that had one of the most breakout runs in the National Football last year. One of the most efficient backs in football as well, especially while splitting carries with Najee Harris. We understand that Jaylen Warren may be the more talented running back on this team. However, with the hamstring injury, it's seeming as if right now he is questionable going into week 1. If you did play the 0 RB strategy, maybe you're forced into playing him. But if you can find another option, if you went with the Ramondre Stevenson, who I absolutely love and adore this week, maybe a Javonte Williams versus the Seattle Seahawks. I really like those 2 guys over Jaylen Warren, who were kind of drafted in that same range and realm as, of course, Jaylen Warren. But give it a couple of weeks. Hamstring injuries are always tricky. And God forbid you have Jaylen Warren in your lineup. In week 1, he goes out there and he retweaks it. Then you have a negative and a 0 for the weekend. And now you're kind of kicking yourself in the back of the foot. So to me, I'm going to stay away from Jaylen Warren and just play it safe for a little while longer.
Audio better or worse with this?
Better.
Okay, beautiful. I'll be honest. I just guessed on this thing to turn a couple of knobs. Just guessed.
You cooked.
Moving on though, wide receiver sit of the week. This is a bit of a cop out because we don't even know if this guy is gonna play.
Jamar?
But DeAndre Hopkins.
Okay.
DeAndre Hopkins. Don't know if everyone saw it. He tore his MCL. Just randomly tore his MCL, and he's like, yeah, like maybe I'll play week 1. Don't love that. Not even a little bit. This is a really tough matchup going against the Chicago Bears. This defense was 5th in dropback per EPA per dropback in the second half of last season. Of course, we know the competition they've added with Calvin Ridley, with Tyler Boyd. You bring in Tony Pollard in this backfield too, and Tajay Spears, who I'm anticipating to have a larger role in this offense as well. The injury alone would make me very worried about this, but add in the terrible matchup, add in all of the new targets are coming in here, and add in, we don't know what the hell Will Levis really is. Put DeAndre Hopkins on the bench. Hopefully he sits. You don't even have to make that decision, but would definitely be more excited to start a guy like Calvin Ridley in the same matchup. But we'll see what D-Hop has going forward. I think he still has something left in the tank, but the fact that he's coming off a torn MCL, something that he had off-season surgery on, and it felt like the Titans kind of just swept it under the rug. We're like, yeah, no, he's fine. He'll be out there maybe week 1, maybe week 2, maybe week 3. I'm not interested at all in starting him week 1.
Yeah, I got scolded in the comment section for saying that DeAndre Hopkins was going to miss some time. But the report was he did mess up his knee pretty badly, and the report was that he was going to miss some time. DeAndre Hopkins seems to be a superhuman, and it looks like there's a chance he could suit up for week 1. But I'm with you. Play it safe. You don't need to go out there and rush a D-Hop into your lineup. There's definitely going to be more opportunity for that in the near future. But week 1 against Chicago Bears, if he goes out there and he lines up, he's going to be matching up against Jalen Johnson, who's one of the better cornerbacks in the National Football League. So we can definitely wait on D-Hop. I don't know if the comments are being rude about your mic. It sounds good to me, so don't worry about it. It's irrelevant.
How about that? How about you guys fix your damn speakers?
No, you're cooking. At the wide receiver sit for me, I mentioned it. I'm staying on task. I'm sitting Brandon Ayuk versus the New York Jets. Brandon Ayuk's amazing. He's one of the best separators in football. He's one of the best wide receivers in football. Just got paid $30 million annually for 4 years. I'm sitting Brandon Ayuk against the New York Jets. It's not a great matchup. He hasn't had the proper training camp, the normal training camp of other wide receivers. And on top of it, he's going up against an unbelievable secondary, an unbelievable defense in the New York Jets. You know what Sauce Gardner does to number 1 wide receivers. And if he's going to go to the opposite side, DJ Reed is more than capable. However, the pressure that is going to be put on Brock Purdy, especially understanding especially because Brandon Ayuk has not been with the guys. I'm not anticipating week 1 that we just automatically see the Brandon Ayuk we saw last year. It's going to take a little bit for him to get going, and that's okay. He's going to ramp up. He's going to end up being one of the best finishes in fantasy. But for week 1, not a great matchup. Not in the slightest.
The real question is, are you going to be sitting Brandon Ayuk this week?
And it's funny you say that because I have 2 really great matchups that I have 1,000% been contemplating. I'm leaning 90% sit him. That's really strong. I have Terry McLaurin against the Bucs, and I have Ramondre Stevenson against the Bengals. If not for James Cook playing against the Cardinals, I 1,000% would be starting, or I would have had my start of the week be Ramondre Stevenson against the Bengals. One of the worst rush defenses in football, have not had any improvements to that defensive line, especially after losing DJ Reader. Ramondre Stevenson is going to run crazy against them. Terry McLaurin against the Buccaneers. Buccaneers secondary lost Carlton Davis. You have Jamal Dean. Antoine Winfield's more of a lay the boom type of safety, although does have some decent coverage abilities to him as well. I really like Terry McLaurin this season as a whole. Him and Jaden Daniels are going to be amazing. They're going to hyperfixate on each other, and we're going to see Terry McLaurin be one of the breakout guys this season. I'm definitely leaning between the 2 of them. Part of me leans Ramondre because the Bengals rush defense is so terrible. But Brandon Ayuk, also Monday night game, don't love that either. I think I'm sitting Ayuk.
I love when dudes hyperfixate on each other, man. It's one of my favorite things. I knew
you were going to say something. I knew it. I knew it.
Tight end sit of the week. I'm going to go with another rookie here. Had Caleb as my quarterback. Going with Brock Bowers as my tight end of the week. And I have to start him in one of my leagues in the finest. I will be starting him just because, goddamn, I have Brock Bowers and Ben Sennett. That's all I got right now. But I am a bit worried about him week one. He's been limited for the last few weeks in practice. It felt like he was banged up basically all of training camp. He did play in the preseason. It was great because we saw him line up in the backfield. We saw him line up in line. We saw him line up in the slot as well. And again, this rookie fever, there's a lot of hype around all of these guys. Brock Bowers was one of the better tight end prospects, best tight end prospects since Kyle Pitts. Some people think he was a better tight end prospect than Kyle Pitts was. He's a guy that led Georgia in receiving as a freshman at 18 years old. He's got all the talent in the world to do it. But week one, I don't hate the matchup going up against the Chargers. I think that's a fine matchup, but the injury does concern me, right? Antonio Pierce has said that he's going to be good to go, but you do worry that, number one, rookie tight ends typically start out slow, right? Last season's an outlier. Sam Laporta being the tight end one overall, first time in NFL history. Dalton Kincaid ended up having a great season for a rookie tight end. Even a guy like Trey McBride, who's was that last year two? Trey McBride's rookie year didn't do shit. And of course, Brock Bowers has a higher chance of being relevant because Zach Ertz was ahead of Trey McBride. But Michael Mayer is not going to just disappear. Michael Mayer is still going to be utilized in this offense. They used a second-round pick on him just 2 seasons ago. So I think Brock Bowers, especially second half of the year, number one, when he gets over this injury fully, hopefully, and number two, just with time, we typically see these guys break out later in the year for just rookies in general. But week one, go out there, see if there's another guy. Taysom Hill, I'd much rather start over Brock Bowers this week.
Now, my sit of the week is one of your guys that you have been, or I should say you've changed your tune on. And it's really unfortunate and sad, I would say, because there are very few Kyle Pitts truthers the way that you were a Kyle Pitts truther. And honestly, I think everyone was a Kyle Pitts truther, and understandably so. Physical freak, 1,000 yards in his rookie season as a tight end, unbelievable athletic abilities. But the guy's just been incapable of staying healthy and picks up a hamstring injury right before the start of the season. But it seems as if he's going to be good to go. Going up against Pittsburgh, though, adding Patrick Queen, you did just draft Peyton Watson. I don't love this matchup, not even a little bit. And I understand you do have Kirk Cousins and what he's been able to do with the tight end position. Of course, TJ Hawkinson immediately comes to mind. Shout out to the real ones that know what he was doing with Jaden Reed back in the day when the Redskins were still a team. And of course, what he was able to do with Washington. I still don't love the matchup. I think that the Steelers are going to be one of the better defenses in football this year. And I think it starts week one. I think there's going to be a grinded out game regardless of who does win. It's definitely going to have to be a grinded out win for the Steelers offense, because that is going to be one of the worst things you're going to watch all year. I would love for them to prove me wrong. However, in this matchup, especially with the uncertainties of what a Kyle Pitts can do, it's funny you say that. I was thinking about Brock Bowers over Kyle Pitts this week, but I can understand still sitting them both.
Yeah, and Kyle Pitts also dealing with the hamstring injury. He said he's fine. He tweeted something out like, you guys are bugging over me missing 4 reps or something, but he was listed as limited, I believe, in the latest practice report on Thursday. But again, listen, he's been injured his whole career, more or less. It's unfortunate, but the fact that he's entering week one with a hamstring injury now, on top of kind of uncertainty, right? We know this Atlanta's passing attack. Drake London's going to be the number one. We know Bijan's that dude. Kyle Pitts is really the question mark. It's is he going to be the top 5 overall pick where the college profile was so terrific, the athletic profile was so terrific, and he could be a stud? Or is it going to be what we've seen the last couple of seasons where the talent's there, but it's really been hampered by injuries?
All right, Mr. Dehls, let's go on to the questions. We wrap up our starts and sits of the week. We'll just recap it real quick. My starts of the week are going to be Mr. Baker Mayfield versus the Commanders. I got James Cook going up against the Cardinals. If you want a fantasy dream, you go and you hope and pray that your team's going up against the Arizona Cardinals. At the wide receiver position, I'm going Mr. Cooper Kupp to get his revenge against the Detroit Lions. And tight end position, give me Taysom Hill versus Carolina.
My starts of the week, Jared Goff going up against the Rams, highest over-under of the week. Kenneth Walker going up against the Denver Broncos, who had one of the worst rush defenses in the league last year. Mike Evans and mostly Chris Godwin, because everyone started Mike Evans, going up against the Commanders, and Dalton Kincaid going up against the Cardinals.
And some sits. Unfortunately, someone has to say, but we got to sit some Niners. Let's sit Brock Purdy versus the New York Jets, one of the best pass defenses in football. They're going to show that on Monday night. My running back sit of the week is going to be Jalen Warren, having that hamstring injury going into week one against a pretty solid Atlanta Falcons run defense. Let me wait a couple of weeks before I see what Jalen Warren's really made of. At the wide receiver position, Brandon Ayuk versus the Jets. Coming back, especially on a very, very short training camp, as short as it gets, going up against the Jets is not an ideal week one matchup for him. And then Kyle Pitts versus Pittsburgh. The guy's just scary at this point, and I don't know what to trust when it comes to Kyle.
Absolutely. My sits of the week, Caleb Williams at the quarterback position going up against the Titans. Let's wait and see on this Bears offense. Running backs to me, Jerome Ford going up against the Cowboys, who were the 8th best defense against fantasy running backs last season. DeAndre Hopkins coming off a torn MCL. I'm sure he's fine. And Brock Bowers, the rookie tight end who's been dealing with an injury all of training camp.
Coming off a torn MCL. I'm sure he's fine. Let's go through some super chats and let's go through the questions. Listen, if you guys have any questions, now's the time to go in and send them our way. We read this one a little bit early, but let's put it on the screen out of respect. Shout out to Bill, Katie Shoes Part 2. No lie. I mean, Isaiah Likely, he tried his absolute hardest to go ahead and win that game for the Ravens. Santos, I just know y'all will be consistent with the videos, unlike someone I know. I have faith in our brother Riv. I know the fans may not have the most faith, but I believe.
The Kawhi picture was hilarious.
He cooked. He cooked him to the finest degree. But the fantasy reaction is back. And that Dehls curse, it may have some truth, like the Madden curse, like he played all right, but they lost end of the day. So maybe there's still some
the revenge is going to be sweet in the AFC Championship.
Ayuk or Pickens?
Oh, it's a good one. I was low-key thinking about Pickens being my sit of the week. The Russell Wilson news, there's a real chance Justin Fields starts week one, going up against A.J. Terrell, being really the only passing option on that team. Oh, but Ayuk's matchup is so bad.
I've seen a lot of good performances last season against the Atlanta Falcons. Now, they did add Justin Simmons. He's definitely going to add a different dynamic to their secondary. He's an amazing ball hawk safety. And, of course, you mentioned A.J. Terrell, but that really didn't stop wide receivers from having solid performances against them. That also becomes to the fact that their pass rush wasn't great, so quarterbacks had time to sit. But Justin Fields has shown he will throw to his number one option, and that's going to be George Pickens. In this situation, am I getting nasty? I might lean Pickens here. I really hate Ayuk's matchup this week.
Yeah, I think I start Pickens too.
The bid says, should I start Kupp or Kamara in my flex box? Kupp. To me, I'm going Kupp. I'm not really thinking twice about that.
Way higher there.
Deco asked Njoku or Ferguson. Now, in Njoku, these two are matched up against each other. I think I lean Ferguson because the opportunity will be there and it's a little bit more safe. As in with Njoku and Deshaun, I don't know what that connection is going to look like until we see the result on the field. Ferguson, we have a pretty good idea, was one of the league leader at the tight end position in touchdowns, was one of the more targeted tight ends, one of the guys that brought in the most receptions. He's safe. And for that, I'm going Ferguson. I don't care that the Cleveland Browns defense is as good as it is.
I'm starting Ferguson too. David Njoku's second half last year was amazing. He was winning people fantasy championships, but he was doing that with Joe Flacco at quarterback. We saw with Deshaun Watson for really that majority of the time. I mean, Deshaun only started and finished like 4 or 5 games last year, and Njoku was very hit or miss. So week one, let's go Ferguson. But if I'm the Browns, it's the fantasy. Let's get Njoku involved early.
We spoke about this a little bit early on. Do I throw week one to get the priority for Likely? Interesting.
Who's your tight end, Mike?
That is an amazing follow-up question. I don't know if it's ever worth it to lose a game just for priority. If you're still playing priority in waiver wire, level up. Go get some fab.
I didn't even see. I thought he meant he already knew he had the week one priority. I guess obviously doesn't make sense. No, win week one. What are we doing?
Facts. And level up to fab. Come on. It's 2024. Fab's a whole lot better. Listen, shout out to our guy Mook. He went and showed some love. He said Lamar processing speed is ass.
He's always hating on Lamar.
He hates Lamar Jackson. He wasn't the best today, but he was playmaking his ass off in that second half, especially in that fourth quarter. Jaden says, trade Kupp and ETN for Garrett Wilson, I'm assuming, and Ramondre Stevenson. Yes, I think. Is that crazy?
I would rather have Kupp and ETN.
I get it. ETN's so much better than Ramondre, but I think Garrett is so much. I think his ceiling is higher than Cup's this season, at least.
It
But
is.
ETN's a lot better.
Yeah, ETN's a lot better. I mean, yeah, if you desperately want that wide receiver upgrade, but you need to have two other running backs you feel great about. Like you need to have a Brees Hall plus like a James Conner for me to do that
Yeah,
trade.
ETN's strong.
Yeah.
ETN's really strong to give up, and I understand. Cruz says Pitts or Njoku. Honestly, not a great situation, but I'd lean Njoku. I feel like Njoku's a little bit safer than Pitts at this upcoming matchup.
They're saying he has Bijan in that league. I'm assuming
Uh,
this is if this is what Austin is talking about. I don't know. I would go Njoku here though.
Okay. I'm trying to look at some other questions that I didn't have saved. Okay, he's saying keep. All right, let's see. Oh, he already asked this question twice. Uh, we'll read this one. Shout out to Shashuan Brown. Hopefully, I read your name correct. Shashuane. Sasha Un. Who knows? JMO or Chase Brown? LOL. I'm cooked. Now, JMO going up against the Rams. Chase Brown going up against the Patriots. I'd rather JMO versus the Rams. I think that we're going to see a pretty high offensive performance out of the Lions. Rams defense is one of those that has to prove it to us, especially after losing Aaron Donald. I definitely would rather start JMO in this situation.
Jaden, let us know who your RB2 is. For this, they're both kind of shots in the dark, right? Chase Brown, Zach Moss. We don't really know what that split's going to look like. JMO, we also don't really know how he's going to be utilized, but I would go with JMO just from the talk he's been getting in camp to be the real wide receiver 2 on this team. High over under, a lot of scoring. Give me Jameson.
Seven Ocean asks Cup, Mike, Tay, pick 2. I'm assuming Mike Evans, if I had to assume. I really love Cup versus the Lions. I do.
I love all three.
Oof. I would lean Mike over Tay for the sole fact Gardner Minshew's the quarterback. I have Matthew Stafford, Baker Mayfield, and Gardner Minshew. All three have awesome matchups. I'm leaning quarterback in this situation. Give me Cup and Mike.
I think this depends. If you're full PPR, I would go Cup and Tay. If you're half or standard, I would go probably Cup and Mike.
Let's read a couple more and then we'll get out of here. We just broke the hour mark. Highlight Beyond asks Allen Diggs Connor for Jameson Williams, Pacheco, and Pickens. Now, let me say this. Trading already when week 1 hasn't even started, I respect the dedication to the trades. Trust your team. You drafted him for a reason. But I'm assuming it's Josh Allen, Diggs, and James Conner for Jameson Williams, Pacheco, and Pickens. If you're getting Allen, Diggs, and Conner, yes. It's kind of a fleece. I can't think of another Allen. Keenan Allen?
Maybe. That would make more sense. Yeah, let us know which Allen that is. And by the way, I saw Jaden in the comments said he has Javonte as his running back too. Keep ETN, brother.
Yeah, keep ETN, no doubt. If it's Keenan Allen, I still would rather the Keenan Diggs and Allen and Cooper, excuse me. But if it's Josh Allen, I want Allen, Diggs, and Connor, truthfully. It is Keenan Allen. Okay, I still would rather Keenan Allen, Diggs, and Connor, truthfully. Because Jameson Williams, it's one of those, he has to prove it to us. Pacheco has a good floor, I would say. And then George Pickens, especially with Russ and or Justin Fields. How can you love that? All right, we're going to get to a – go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say Pacheco and James Conner, honestly, like I see very similar, right? Like I don't know if either of them are going to be like top 8 guys, but I think both of them are like very comfortably top like 18 type of guys. So it's Keenan Allen and Stephon Diggs or Jameson and George Pickens. I would go with Keenan and Diggs.
All right, let's read a couple more and then we're going to get out of here. Andrew Martinez asks, shout out to Andrew Martinez. That's a pick-a-side legend.
Shout out.
He asks, Ayuk or Pittman? Ooh, Pittman going up against the Texans. I think I still would rather Pittman. He's still their number 1 option. Ayuk is going up against the best defense, arguably, in the National Football League. Again, and he's barely practiced. He's barely been with the team. I'm sure he's been working out like an SOB. He's still one of the best wide receivers in football. But give it a week. And Pittman going up against the Texans, not a great matchup, but it's better than Ayuk.
I don't love either. And the very limited sample we saw with Pittman and Anthony Richardson wasn't the most promising. He wasn't looking his way a ton. But again, Ayuk is he's way too risky this week. Like he could go out there and play 50% of snaps. At least we know Pittman's going to be out there for 90.
All right, last one we're going to take. Shout out to C3JJ. He asked, should I start Taysom Hill over these 3? I'm assuming Rome Dunze, Cousins, or Montgomery?
Cousins.
Now, the Cousins is what's throwing me. I'm not really sure off the top of my head, but Montgomery going up against the Rams.
Like that.
I really like that. I feel like I would rather Montgomery and Rome Odunze going up against the Titans. I still would rather Rome, honestly.
Did they have a typo there? I mean, Kirk Cousins up. Start over Taysom. Yeah, start Kirk Cousins. What are we doing? Wait.
Oh, it's OP? Come on. Yeah, it's Kirk Cousins. I know that the Steelers defense is going to be really good, but you always start the quarterback. 9 out of 10 times, I should say, you start the quarterback unless your quarterback 2 is absolute due. All right, listen, so we're going to wrap it up for this episode of the Fantasy Reaction Show. We covered, of course, the Chiefs and Ravens. We covered our starts and sits of the week every Thursday night, every Monday night, from week 1 all the way to week 17. We're locked in on the Fantasy Reaction Show. We appreciate you guys that tuned in. It should be a fun NFL season. It should be a fun fantasy football season. Hopefully, we have some more games like we watched tonight. But that's going to do it from us over here at the Fantasy Reaction Show. We will see you guys next time.